Welcome to the Ultra Origins series, where we hear from runners who recently finished their first ultra or completed a new distance. In these conversations, we celebrate regular people who are doing hard things. There's a lot we can learn and be inspired by from people just like you. In this episode, we meet Lulu Martinez, a good friend of my wife Leah and me, who we originally met while Lulu's husband Joe and I were both running the Triple Crown of 200s in 2022. While Lulu has been running ultras for a while now, this year she finished her first 200 at the Tahoe 200. After witnessing firsthand the trials of 200-mile runners from the perspective of being a crew member, she knew she wanted the experience for herself. I hope you enjoy Lulu's inspiring journey to the place where miracles happen.
Well, actually, you want to know what's so funny about how there's not that many Lulus out there? There was a conversation that we recorded. A woman named Rhonda met you on the trail, and she became a volunteer and then signed up for a bunch of ultras and then did Sonora Canyons. She was mentioning her story, and she said that she met this person named Lulu. I'm like, I know exactly what you're talking about.
That was the funniest thing ever, because I was just crewing for Joe in this fat-ass 50K that happens here called the Phoenician. And it's extremely hot, very challenging. It's not even like on trails. Like they send them through unmarked trails. And we had just moved here. He was doing it. It is tons of vert, very technical. So I was just following him around like I always do. And I'm like on the parking lot, and this woman comes to me and starts talking. And it was just a conversation of 5-10 minutes. Months passed, and I see her again, and she just welcomes me with this heartwarming feeling. Like the way she talked, it kind of sounded like those 5-10 minutes really changed the course of her life. Knowing that it was a sport, that there were races, it changed the course of her life. And for me, it was just like, this is incredible. This is really incredible. And now she's done Sedona Canyons, and she's at it training. So I'm glad that you met her. I'm assuming you met her at Cocodona, because it kind of sounds like the place where you guys met, I would assume.
Yeah, well, she had actually, we didn't meet there in person, but she did message me on Facebook afterwards, just, let me know that my YouTube channel had kind of been a part of the influence in getting her to where she was. And so then that was kind of when I reached out to her at that point to say, hey, well, why don't you join us on this conversation series? I'd love to hear more about it. And that's when I got to learn about how she met you. And then the really quick jump she went into like doing 5 ultras in 6 months practically in order to get ready for Sedona Canyon.
Yeah.
Quite a journey. Yeah.
Yeah, your YouTube channel is it's like a tradition. Everyone who wants to do a 200 or wants to attempt it is like they have to watch your videos. And it's funny because doing Tahoe, your YouTube channel came up, obviously, because everyone's like, I watch Wes's videos just to prepare. It's not the same course. Parts, yes, but we had new sections. And all I can think of is like, yes, that's a rite of passage, watching Wes's videos. That's like...
Well, we'll get into talking about Tahoe. Why don't you start off by just introducing yourself to the audience? Tell us a little bit about where you came from, where you live, or whatever you want to say, and then maybe we can get into how you got into running at the very beginning, and then in a little bit, we'll talk about how you transitioned into Tahoe 200. I'm excited to hear about that too.
Yeah, of course. I'm Lulu Martinez, and I currently live in Arizona. I'm Mexican. I'm a Mexican citizen, and I've been living in the U.S. Almost 11 years. It's going to be almost 11 years. I came here to go to grad school. I have a master's in science of book publishing. So I work in New York, but remotely. About a year ago, me and my husband, we moved to Arizona because we wanted a different kind of life. We wanted to be closer to the trails. So we've been living in Arizona for almost a year now. I started running actually in my adult life, maybe mid-20s. I wasn't a sporty kid or teenager. I didn't play any sports. I actually stayed away from them. I was the typical teenager that when I was in high school and we had PE, I would skip it and go with my girlfriends and, go to the bathroom and just talk or maybe smoke some Marlboro Lights. but I would stay away from PE. Obviously, at the end of the term, I would have to do something because I would fail. But I wasn't a sporty person. In my mid-20s, I got a gym membership. I started going to the gym, and the treadmill seemed like the easiest thing to do. So I started walking and, trying to stay on a running pace for 3 minutes, and those 3 minutes became 5 minutes and then 10 minutes. The company I was working at back then had like a 5K, 10K series that they would do. So I registered for a 5K. I enlisted my brother just because I didn't want to be alone. And, I did my first 5K and I thought, okay, there is something in here that I like. And the first 5K became a 10K, and then I moved to the US, and I had only done 10Ks. The university placed me in their dorms, and I wanted to meet people. I was maybe 28, 29 years old, and I wanted to meet people. So I volunteered at the New York City Marathon because the entire city changes. It's electrifying, the energy. So I volunteered there, and I noticed a lot of people were wearing team singlets. So I thought, oh, these are running groups. I should join one. So I literally just Googled them. I joined one, and I would show up to Central Park to do like 3 miles, 5 miles. And then I did my first half marathon in January 2014.
Oh, okay.
That same night, I was flying high. I thought, wow, this is incredible. What else is there? Someone told me about this very gnarly 50K, but it didn't really translate in my mind. I didn't see much of a difference between a half marathon and a 50K. So I thought, why not? And that night I signed up for it. And so that's how I made the transition. It just felt like, well, a half marathon was nice. It was fun. A 50K should be double plus a little more fun. Why not? Let's go. And that's how it happened.
So how far was it time distance between when you ran your first half marathon to this first 50K?
My first half marathon was in late January, and the 50K was in May. So it wasn't that much.
Wow.
Yeah.
You just jumped right into it.
Yes. And now we're married. His name is Joe and I, but back then we had just started dating. He was already an ultra runner. He had already done a lot of things, including Leadville 100. So he was signed up for that same race, but instead of the 50K, he was doing the 50 miler. So, we were dating, so he thought, let me take you there so you see what this course looks like. When I stood there, I was like, oh, okay. Bear Mountain in New York, that place, Harriman State Park, is very gnarly. Tons of elevation, very, very much the East Coast. A lot of rocks, a lot of roots. It tends to be muddy. But, I did it. I finished my first 50K, and I thought, this is pretty cool. And so I just stayed there in the sport.
How was it in terms of like the feeling? Was it difficult for you to do this 50K after, not having trained, I assume, specifically for it very long? I mean, just a few months after your first half marathon, it wasn't like you had a huge base built up.
No.
So I'm curious how it felt to do that.
Well, it's a race. It doesn't exist anymore, but there's a lot of people, right? So you're always with someone on the trails. And I think that feeling of being with peers, it just kind of carries you. And 50K is like 32 miles, so maybe around mile 10, I believe, I paired up with a girl that I already knew, and she was there. So it wasn't her first time, so she was very nice to me. She said like, oh, let's stick together, stay with me, let's go. And our little group of 2, then 2 more people joined. And you know how it goes. conversations happen, then you let that feeling carry you. And so that girl and I crossed the finish line together. Actually, maybe like 500 meters before the finish line, she said, "You go ahead. This is yours. Cross alone. Get that feeling. I'm right behind you." And so that's, looking back at it, I was completely unprepared, but it was a great time because I had people there with me. So I think that changed everything. But yeah, I was completely unprepared. And her name is Lisa Chow.
Are you still in touch with Lisa?
Yes. We're still in contact, yeah.
It's one of the greatest things about this community is how close you get to people in a really short amount of time.
Yeah.
You run the trail with them and like you're instant best friends.
Yeah, that is so true. You really become, I don't know what is it about the sport. And even when we are so different, you really create these bonds that last years. Yeah, and we all want to see each other succeed, right? Like you really want to see the people out there finish that race. Yeah, there's something special about this sport.
Oh, I like hearing you say that. I like your smile when you say it too. Yeah, it's so special. Yeah. Okay, so 2014, you have gone from running 5K, maybe 10Ks, but they've now done a half marathon and a 50K. Of course, you've done lots of ultras since then. So can you tell us a little bit about how you then started to continue through the ultra journey, and then we'll then pick up to this year, your big leap.
So that summer in 2014, one of my friends was running Vermont 100. It is, a very old 100 miler, part of the Grand Slam, and she asked me and Joe, my boyfriend back then, now husband, if we could come and pace and crew. So I thought, sure, I don't have anything else to do. So the three of us went there. I had no idea what this was like. Joe back then he was injured, so I was a pacer. And we followed her. The thing about the Vermont 100 is that it feels like a family. It's not one of those big production races that you get there and there's, cameras and all the glamour. It really feels like a family. It's a small community, and the majority of the race runs through private property. You're running through people's backyards. So the people come out to cheer you. They sit on their lawns. They have like sponges because it's really hot. They have tubs with cold water, and at night they light up fires just to see the runners, and they cheer for you, and they put signs. So it's just that feeling of like being surrounded by family, even though you've never met these people. And we started following her aid station to aid station, and when it was my turn to start pacing her, I paced her the last 30 miles. At night, I remember we turned off our lights and we looked at the sky, and it was this beautiful New England sky full of stars. And you see the mountains around you, and Vermont is very green, and I thought, there's something really special happening here. What is this? And we would go into aid stations and people welcome you, and it's like a big party. And I thought, oh, I have to try this. I have to do this. And so she finished. We crossed that finish line together, and I went back home and I started doing, my Googling, my ultra sign up search. What can I do? How can I, try a 100 miler? And so I registered for my first 50 miler, and then my first 100 miler, which I did in January 2015, and that's the Coldwater 100, which happens here in Arizona, in Phoenix. So that's kind of like how I took that step into the 100 miler.
What made you choose a race in Arizona with you living in New York at the time?
Well, I'm not someone who does well in the cold weather. I don't like cold weather, and asking around like, oh, what race can I do that it's friendly, it's easy. That friend Michelle, who I had paced at Vermont, she told me, oh, there is this race in Arizona. It's very first-timer friendly. And she told me, you know, this company, they are really good with the aid stations and they're friendly people. You should do it. She said she had done, I think, the 50 miler the year before. And I didn't know any better, so I was like, sure, let me sign up. Let's all go to Arizona in winter, because that way we escape from the cold weather. And so that was kind of my decision process. It wasn't, you know, there wasn't much to it.
Well, did you do much training differently than what you had been doing in order to get ready for that race?
You know, I was completely underprepared. I put together a plan from, you know, the ones that are available online. And so that's how I trained. But no, once, you know, looking back, I didn't train properly. I didn't have a nutrition and hydration strategy. I just showed up hoping for the best. And I think I just really wanted it. I really, really wanted it. And so things inevitably got really hard, but I wanted it. And I was DFL. I think there were like 32 finishers and I was the last one. And actually when I crossed the finish line, they had already removed the finish line. It was just the mat.
Oh.
Wow. But I finished and I couldn't really walk for like a week or maybe two, but I wanted it. I really had that hunger for it, and that's what carried me through. But I was completely underprepared.
Yeah, well, it's just I guess it's a good reminder to new runners how even if you're underprepared, which I think most people are on their first time, they don't really know what they're getting themselves into. If it is that spirit and that hunger and drive, that mental attitude to finish can sort of overcome your body's screaming, saying, stop, stop.
Yes, and I was very lucky that I had my husband, Joe, and my friend, Michelle, there with me. And both of them already had a lot of experience. So they already knew things that I didn't, right? And while we were out there, they knew what to say. They knew how to pace. So even though I was completely inexperienced, they weren't. So my lack of experience, you know, they make up for that. Otherwise, you know, if I wouldn't have had them, I don't think I would have finished. But, you know, having crew and pacers who know what they're doing. If it is your first time, if you don't have that experience, I think that's fundamental. That can make or break your race, at least in my experience. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really great point, that you can lean on that experience of your network to help you through that. Having a pacer or a crew on your first event would be huge. I'm so lucky you had that. That's really great.
Yeah, you know, because things will get hard. And so you might sit on a rock and you might say, I don't want to do this anymore. This sucks. And if your crew and your pacers, if they have never experienced this, they could totally say, okay, you've already done 70 miles. That's okay. Let's call that a win and let's go. But Joe and Michelle already had that experience, so they were like, right now you feel awful, but in a few hours, maybe in 10 minutes, you're gonna feel great. So let's keep moving. Let's keep moving. And I remember Michelle would tell me, put your New Yorker pace on and let's just walk. Let's walk. Imagine you're in Times Square, so let's walk. Let's walk. I'll never forget that.
That's really good advice. So then you just continue to do more ultras, right? I mean, it seems like, looking at your ultra sign up, that you've done quite a few ultras, 42Ks, 100 milers. I know you did a Javelina 100 a few times, maybe even more than a few.
I've done it twice. I DNF'd it once. You know, I got uncomfortable and I let that convince me that I should stop. But you know, at the moment, you're thinking you're making the right decision. And with time, you realize you had what it takes to continue, right? Like, you just got uncomfortable. But I finished, but then I went back and I finished Javelina twice. And I did Vermont 100. I went back and I did that course, the 100 miler, and I've done the 100K there as well. And I did Zion 100 this year to prepare for Tahoe. Yeah, and 50 milers and 50Ks and 60Ks, 100Ks, so a little bit of everything. But yeah, I've done a few distances, yeah.
So at some point you said to yourself, 100 miles isn't enough. I need to do something bigger. And so somehow you found yourself signed up for Tahoe 200. How did that happen?
Yes, so Joe, my husband, signed up for the Triple Crown the same year you did it, 2022. And so I'm his crew and his pacer. And we went to Tahoe, and I'm following him through the 8 stations, right? Tahoe City and this and that. And as the miles are going by, the days are going by, I noticed that not only him, but the runners, you guys were arriving into the 8 stations. And as the miles had gone by, I noticed that something had changed within you guys. You would come into the 8th station, sure, tired and sleep deprived, but there was something in the runner's eyes. There was something that you all shared that it looked like there was some deep transformation happening. And I thought, interesting. And then, you go to the golden hour and everyone is there, we are having, I think, pizzas, and there's like sodas, and we're all waiting for the final runners. And we get up, we do the human tunnel, the last runner comes through, we all exploding, this ecstasy, everyone is so happy. And I thought, okay, this is where it's at. Something happens in here and I need to experience it. And so that day I thought, okay, maybe I'm just riding high from all of these feelings. I'm gonna give myself a couple of days. I didn't say anything, but then when we were flying back, we were we had a layover and we're sitting on the Delta Lounge, and I told Joe, I want to go for Tahoe. And he's like, go, put your name right now. And that's how I got into Tahoe. Just because I was there and I saw it and I thought, this is where magic happens. That was it.
Well, what a powerful way to experience it too. I think most of us have either seen it through social media or YouTube, or we've just sort of seen it virtually, these experiences people were having. But you were there in person, seeing the look in our eyes and seeing sort of our aura change in front of you. That must have been really amazing to witness that, watching Joe change and the rest of us do the same.
It was, and then we all went to Bigfoot. And Bigfoot was, I think it is the greatest 200 miler. It's just so secluded, and all the crews, we are talking to each other, just waiting, because there's no cell phone service, right? And you can't really get out of the forest. Once you're there, you're there. And so that's how I became friends with Leah, because we were just talking. And so, you see this miracle happen. And then the last stop was Moab, and it just made me much more excited for giving it a try. And then you talk to people, and as you talk to people, you realize you don't have to be a super fast runner. A lot of the people I talked to, they would tell me, oh, I've never even done a 100 miler. I'm a hiker, I'm a through hiker, I hike. And so hearing their stories, I thought, this sport is for everyone. There is a place for everyone. You don't have to be a strong, super fast, speedy runner. You can actually hike the entire course if you choose to do so. And so I thought, okay, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna claim my spot in there. And that's what I did.
Oh God, I just love it so much. So you trained pretty hard for Tahoe, though. I remember watching you on Instagram, and you were really pushing hard, not like over hard, but you were working really hard. And I also noticed you would often talk in the text of your posts, or maybe even on screen on the stories. Sorry, I sound so old when I'm describing social media, but I remember it really seemed like you were working hard because you were like almost nervous about this. You were scared, it's almost seemed to me. And so why don't you talk about that training process you were going through to get yourself ready for Tahoe?
Yes, so I was scheduled to do Tahoe in 2023, but it was the year they had this record-breaking snow, so they moved it from June to July. I couldn't do July because we were moving to Arizona, so I deferred to 2024. But in reality, I actually started training for Tahoe in 2022.
Okay.
Going into it, I was very lucky to find a coach that understood me where I was, and we had a plan. So shout out to Mountain Peak Fitness and Coach Elizabeth. But I knew that I didn't have the experience to do Tahoe. There was a lot of ground to cover. I'm just a back of the pack. I'm back of the pack. Naturally, I'm always like in that last group of people. So Tahoe was gonna be that. Me trying to chase those cutoffs and try to not stay behind and really have some buffer so that I could stay at the aid stations. But it was also the climbing. It's mountains, so there's a lot of climbing. So I also needed to train for that. My training had a little bit of everything. We had our cross training days, which I did a lot of Peloton, but also swimming. I did a lot of hiking. And I think that really was kind of like one of the key factors that made my race successful, that I learned to power hike. I learned to move efficiently while hiking. So I trained a lot with a heavy backpack, just because you're gonna have a heavy backpack on race day.
Yeah.
There were a lot of strength sessions in the gym and, doing all the things that runners we should be doing. But not only the legs, but also the upper part, like learning how to do pull-ups and things like that. A lot of mobility just to keep the body happy. The idea was, let's do all the things you need to do to get yourself at the start line uninjured, healthy, strong. I didn't want to be at the start line with like pains or things. So, and then we had our normal running sessions, and we had a climbing goal every single week. So that was kind of like what my training looked like. We had races that became like training sessions. I did Coldwater 60K, I did Black Canyon 100K, Zion 100, and I learned a lot. Thankfully, I did those races because things that needed to be tweaked became apparent. Like Black Canyon 100, it's 100K. It was terrible for me. It went awful because my nutrition and my hydration were not where they should have been, and so that made my race terrible. But that was good because I learned, I tweaked, and then I went back and I did another race and things went better. But that was, in a nutshell, how my training looked like. It wasn't all running. There was a little bit of everything. But it was, I think I was very lucky to have someone who knew where I was. And so she really created a plan to get me to that finish line at Tahoe. This time I didn't create a plan for myself based on Google.
Right. Yeah, it sounds like having that coach was really a smart move, that you were able to have such specific training to help you get there. Besides Zion 100, did you do any specific overnight training? Some people don't necessarily do that, but in a 100-miler, there's going to be nighttime running, obviously. So you've got to have that. But I'm wondering if you did anything else to get ready for the nighttime sections.
Yes, we went to the Grand Canyon. We didn't cross the entire Grand Canyon, but we went a little further from the Colorado River and then back up. And we did it at night, and we started as soon as the sun was setting down. And we did that on purpose, just so that, and the plan was have a full-time day of work, like a full work day, and then do your hike, just so that you're already tired. And that was good because, I'm not someone who likes the dark very much. So having those practice runs was good to just, feel a little bit more comfortable in the dark.
Okay, so then now you've done all this training, and a few weeks ago you found yourself at the starting line at Heavenly, ready to do Tahoe 200. Did you feel like you were ready when you were at the start line?
Yes, and that was the only thing I wanted. As race day approached, those like 3 weeks before race day, I started questioning everything, right? Like, did I do everything? Could I have done more? Am I ready? You start having those inner thoughts. But I sort of like kept a journal of my entire journey, and I would write down everything that I was learning as I was learning it. So I went back to my journal, and I work in book publishing, so I naturally read a lot. So I was reading a lot of books about human behavior and, your psyche and things like that. So I was taking notes and just like little mantras here and there. So I went back and I reread all my writings and the things that I had learned. And that's kind of like when I realized, okay, I've done everything that I could have done. I'm towing that start line confident that I trained. I can't control what happens on race day, but I trained. So my body is ready. And that was all I wanted, right? To be ready, physically to be ready. Mentally, it's a whole different thing, right? Because you're going to be out there for such a long time. But physically, I was ready. And so that gave me the confidence to feel like I belong there. With all those runners, incredible athletes, I had a place there.
Yeah. Well, then, why don't you take us through the next, was it 5 days of your life then? It must have been just thinking about what you were going through, knowing a little bit about the course. But I'm just, why don't you tell us about how it went, some of the highs and lows? I'd love to hear about your journey on that course.
Yeah, so it starts in Heavenly, and then you have an out and back to Housewife Hill. And that out and back is 63 miles. You don't see your crew, you don't have pacers throughout that time. Once you get back to Heavenly, which is, like 62, 63, once you get back to Heavenly, you see your crew for the first time and you're able to pick up pacers. And that's when you make another out and back to Tahoe City, which is the course that you already know, from Heavenly to Tahoe City and back. So my plan was that those first 63 miles, try to stay with people, right? There are bears out there. So I was like, I don't want to see a bear. So my plan was just, to make friends, to stay with a group. And that's exactly what happened. I was very lucky that I met a girl, Danielle. We actually met the day before at packet pickup. We were standing online, next to each other, so we started talking. And this at the start of the race, she says, "Hey Lulu, come over here." And so I stand next to her, and we all start. And so we started talking. We shared each other's, strategy. Like, what's my strategy? What's your strategy? And then we just thought, let's stay together. And we said it out loud. Let's stay together until we're back at Heavenly. And that's what we did. And there was some snow crossing. There was snow on the course. And while we were crossing that snow, we met another runner, Steven, and he stayed with us all the way until we made it back to Heavenly. So we became like the three friends. And we would go into the aid stations and be intentional about it, to say, okay, let's do what we need to do and let's regroup. We're not leaving anyone behind. And the course is absolutely stunning. It's beautiful. You go up these mountains and, they're covered in snow still. And the view is just breathtaking. It really makes you feel like this has to be heaven. This is paradise. And there are, we made our way those 63 miles. At night, navigating the snow became a little complicated. So, you pull out your Gaia map just to see where you are. The snow crossing in the early morning, the snow had become icy just because the temperatures. I fell and I just slid through the snow. That was like, everyone was like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "I'm okay." Thankfully, I was okay. It was kind of like, okay. I was so scared of falling on the snow. And it happened, so you're like, okay, that's done. Yeah, that already happened. Yeah. And then as we're crossing, kind of like there is this like water falling, and it's ice all around it. And as we're crossing, I let go of one of my poles by mistake, and my pole falls on that water, and it just starts, going down. I scream, like I thought, oh my God, what am I gonna do now? And Steven went down. He actually went down, grabbed my pole and went back. And I thought, I'm indebted to you for the rest of my life. Like, and and it's going back again to that community, the people that you meet there. You really want everyone to succeed. And so you are gonna do what you can to help them. And you know that they're gonna do what they can to help them. And so the three of us stayed together until we went back to Heavenly. When we went back to Heavenly, we said, okay, break, 2 hours, let's meet back here. I tried to sleep. It didn't happen. Sleep was something that just eluded me. I couldn't really sleep. And then, I picked up my first pacer, Joe, and then we all went back and made our way to Spooner, which it was just so fun because Spooner was decorated as Alice in Wonderland. And you know the course, you're always going up or down, like up or down. There are rarely any flats. But the views are just breathtaking, right? Every time you get to the top, to a summit, the views are beautiful. So we get to Spooner. I try to take a trail nap once again. It didn't happen. So that's the start of the second night. Once we leave Spooner is the start of the second night. The second night for me was when I started experiencing like my first hallucinations. Again, I couldn't really sleep, so my brain was already tired. And I had visual but also auditive, like I was also hearing things. It was a little freaky because you're like, what is happening? I had never experienced anything like that, but I guess you get used to it. By the end of the race, I was used to it, and everything went away as soon as I slept. But we went from Spooner to Incline Village, or Village Green, I think is the name, which is actually a new aid station. I don't think when you did it, I don't think that aid station was there. And you know, I again try to take a nap. My coach was there because she actually drove in her van to crew. She was there with her husband and their puppy. So, you know, puppy kisses and all of that is always fun. And then she started pacing me, and she paced me to Tahoe City. Her her pacing style was really good because she was like ahead of me the entire time, just setting the pace. Not too close for us to have a conversation, but not too far that she wouldn't hear me. And as my coach, she would turn around every so often and say, have a gel, have a bar right now, make sure you're drinking water right now. So all those things that start slipping off my mind, she had me doing it like a clock. And we did the power line together. You know that section, very steep.
So steep.
It's so steep. It's like a mile or a little more than a mile, and it has over 1,000 feet climb. It is so steep. But once you do it, again, the views are incredible. And so we get to Tahoe. Oh, we go to Brockway. First is Brockway Summit. Great aid station. Oh, I forgot to mention, I started having blisters at mile 30. Mile 30, yes. So it became kind of like a game of let's keep adding tape, and if needed to retape, let's do that. You know, at Brockway, I was, I was already covered in tape and blisters. But you know, the medic team at Destination Trail, they're really good. They know what they're doing. So I was very lucky to have my feet really taken care of. You somewhat learn how to move with the tape and that uncomfortable feeling. It never got bad to the point where I thought I'm gonna quit. You know, I just kept adding tape. And so, you know, my coach and I get to Tahoe City, and it's the third night. It was already dark. It was the third night. Once again, I try to sleep, but it wouldn't really happen. I would sleep for maybe 1 minute and then wake up. I think, you know, my brain, I could never shut it down. I always had that feeling of we need to go, cutoffs, get up, cutoffs. That feeling of I need to get to the next cutoff. So I was never able to fully relax. I always had that cutoff looming over my head. I never got to the point in which you only have a couple of minutes, and no. But you know, you don't want to get to the aid station with 30 minutes to spare. You want hours. You really need hours. So I wasn't really able to sleep a lot. So when we get to Tahoe City, it was already night, the third night, and I jumped on my coach's van, and I stayed in there for maybe like an hour and a half. You know that Tahoe has that they call it the Tahoe lung, right? The Tahoe cough. I don't know what is it about that course that everyone ends up coughing and like with really bad phlegm. I was wearing a buff for the majority of the race, so my cough wasn't as bad as it was for some people. But every time I would lay down, the phlegm would just come up. It was just like, I'm sure you know that. It's just that continuous cough and the phlegm trying to get out, and it would only happen when I lay down. So that coughing, but also my active brain didn't really let me sleep. When we got to Tahoe City the third night, that was the first time that I slept. It wasn't much, even though I laid in bed for an hour and a half. I slept maybe 20 minutes because I was coughing and coughing. And so my coach's pacing ends. I pick up Joe, and then Joe and I made our way back to the finish line. So we went back from Tahoe, and we got to Brockway City. It was already the fourth day. It was the fourth day. We get there, and it's not too close to the cutoff, but you can see that they have already started breaking down things. I knew I was back of the pack, but you know, I lay down for like 30 minutes just trying to calm down. I ate, and we continued our way. When we got to Incline Village, or I think it's called Incline Village or Village Green, you know, you descend the power line again. You know, you go up and then you have to go down. As I'm going down, I fell twice, and you just fall and you slide because it's incredibly steep, right? But you know, you continue. We got to the aid station, and I had maybe like a couple of hours before that cutoff. So I ate, changed, got ready for the night, and that was gonna be the fourth night. And they informed us at the aid station that they had received notice that the weather had changed. It was gonna get extremely cold. So as you left the aid station, they were checking gear. They were checking you had the mandatory gear and just letting you know the weather change. As you summit the next mountain, it's gonna be very cold. And so we go on to the fourth and final night. That night for me was the most difficult one, because you're already tired, you're sleep deprived, and you're going up a mountain. It's extremely dark, it's extremely cold, and you can see that somehow the mood had changed. All of us who were on the back of the pack, we were kind of like leapfrogging each other, right? Mm-hmm. So I would see someone sleeping on the side of the trail, and then I would pass them, and they would pass me. But everyone already looked really tired, naturally. That night was when I had my most intense hallucinations. Joe was pacing me, and we're going up the mountain, and he's in front of me. And he would turn around, and he tells me, and he would turn around, and he would see me just standing there with my pulse, just sleeping. But then I would lay down on the trail to try to take a nap, and it wouldn't happen. It was so cold that within minutes you start freezing. You need to keep moving. Yeah. So that night was really cold, really hard. And I was having very vivid hallucinations in which I remember seeing a bathroom, like a whole construction, a bathroom. And I remember telling Joe, "Oh, go in the bathroom. I'm gonna wait here for you." And then the real Joe would turn around and tell me, "Who are you talking to? What is happening here?"
Oh my gosh.
And I'm like, "Oh, I'm just waiting for you to get out of the bathroom." And he's like, "I'm here in front of you, and there's no bathroom here. Come on, let's keep moving." So that moment for me was really difficult, because like you're hanging on the last thread of logical and reason that you have in your brain, but your brain is gone. So we make it to the summit. The air is so cold that it just hit me in the face, and it woke me up. And it's covered in snow. And then we start our descent into Spooner Summit. Once we get down on Spooner Summit, you have about 20 miles to the finish line. The sun is coming up, and they have fire going on. There is breakfast. Everyone is so tired. When we got to Spooner, I just felt like I had danced with the devil that night. It felt like the devil and I played Russian roulette, and I escaped. So when we got to Spooner Summit, I thought the hardest part is done. I had a lot of time to get to the finish line. It was early in the morning. The sun was just rising, and the last cutoff is 6 p.m. So I thought, I have until 6 p.m. to do 20 miles. This is in the bag. This is done. And so I felt this overwhelming sensation of the worst is done. the worst is done. You know, we switched layers, get ready for the last section, and then we went. And that last section from Spooner to to Heavenly is absolutely beautiful. You have the lake, and you know, it goes on and on and on and on, and it's just incredibly beautiful. And then suddenly you see that sign that says finish line, and you know Heavenly is right there. You have less than a mile to get to Heavenly, and if you somewhat peek, you can see the gondola and all that thing that happens at Heavenly, because Heavenly is a ski place. And you know, I'm there. So you start sprinting with what I felt like I was sprinting, but I don't know about that. But I'm sprinting and I can hear the cowbells. I crossed the finish line, and going through it, I didn't hear anything. It's like everything stopped existing. And then I crossed that finish line, and it was a sensation of, I did it. All that effort, everything that I invested into this little dream that I had, it was worth it. And yes, there are miracles that happen out there. There is deep transformation. Your cellular, your cells, your bones, everything changes while you're battling out there. And so I just crossed that finish line with my Mexican flag. And I just, it was one of the greatest feelings of my life.
Oh, congratulations. What an exciting time that must have been. Leah and I were traveling, and when we were watching you on the tracker, and we really wish that we could have been there in person, because we were like, oh, really wish we could be there. We had been in Tahoe previously before together, and so it would have been neat if we could have been there. So you talk about transformation. You talk about miracles happening. How would you describe the way you see yourself differently now versus how you used to think of Lulu?
Well, I think that I learned many lessons throughout my training and during the race. But really the biggest one, the one that I think will have the most impact throughout my life, is that we really are capable of everything we set our mind to. I am capable of a lot. I have, the type of job that requires you to be sitting in front of your computer for 8 hours a day. And so sometimes it's easy to forget that your body is capable of so much more than you give it credit. But at the same time, my mind and my spirit, I questioned many times if I had a place amongst the 200-miler athletes, right? I knew that being back of the pack, I knew that it was going to be a lot of those chasing cutoffs. I wasn't going to be one of those runners that finish and then they have time to shower and eat and sleep and then they go back to the finish line. But I had a lot of moments where I questioned, do I belong there? And hell yeah, I belong there. And so that feeling of I belong where I want to belong, that is life-changing. The realization that I have what it takes, that I can do anything that I set my mind to, and that I belong within the 200-miler finishers. Yeah.
It tells me that you already had everything that you needed to finish this. This just gave you the evidence that you are that powerful. So it's not like Tahoe makes you powerful, or the finishing a 200 turns you into somebody who is so strong. You already were. It's just this is now showing you. It gave you the like I said, the evidence that you can do anything you set your mind to. We are so powerful. Yeah, that is an amazing thing to learn.
Yes, yes, it is. It was. And I am still on cloud nine. It's been like 20 days, but I'm still on cloud nine. And every day I'm still, thinking about the race and the moments and the people that I met and just the kindness, right? The kindness of strangers. That is something that, is so powerful. Yeah.
Well, there's a joke everyone says that I don't even like to drive 200 miles, whenever they talk to us. But a lot of runners also just say that they don't think it's possible that they could do something like this. They don't see this physical challenge as within their grasp. But I think what I'm hearing you say is that there is. Can you talk a little bit to somebody who's listening to this, who's just starting out and they see 200 is so impossible? They might even see 100 is impossible. How can we encourage them to continue one foot in front of the other to get their goal?
I think that is a very common misconception that if you aren't from a certain group, like maybe front of the pack or mid pack, then that there is no space for you and you don't belong there. I think that it really is about putting the training and also yourself with people who have done what you want to do. I think that for me it was very important that I had a husband who had done the Triple Crown. So I had seen those races. I knew what those races looked like. From a crew and pacer perspective, sure, but it gives you a different understanding. So my advice for anyone who wants to do a 100-miler or a 50-miler or just a race that is a bigger distance than what you've ever done is surround yourself with the people who have done what you want to do. And then go and experience it. Go and see what it is about. Maybe volunteer, maybe pace, maybe crew, or just go and be a spectator. But it really gives you a better understanding of what an ultra looks like. Particularly these distances that last more than 24 hours. And you'll see a lot of people that look like you, a lot of people within your pace. You'll see that there are a lot of people out there battling the same stuff that you are battling. It's an incredible community, and there's a lot of people who are doing incredible things. So I think that just going and experiencing this can change anyone's mind about whether or not they belong.
Yeah, it is a powerful comment about feeling like you belong. I know that there are people who feel like they don't, and so they don't even take a chance to step into the community or to try these distances or these events. I think there's so much about these events when you see them on social media or the advertising where they focus a lot on the people who are winning the race. And if you don't feel like you belong, that's not going to encourage you that you do. I think that these stories like yours are so powerful to share how everybody belongs in this space. And if you've worked at it, you have a good chance of being able to finish. Yeah, like you say, maybe you're going to be towards the middle or the back of the pack, but that's where the hard stuff's happening. Everyone's working so hard back there, and you can really feel like you belong when you're in that group.
But it's also where the party is at.
Yeah, you guys partying back there? I love it.
Yeah, I think that a lot of, for many years I thought, oh, I'm a back of the pack. I have no business in these longer races or with these people that are so fast. And then I realized, no, I belong where I want to belong. And there is a space for me. And even if there is not, I will create it. And yes, I finished as a back of the pack. But I finished, and that's what matters.
That's exactly right.
Yes.
I belong where I want to belong. I love that. That is my Lulu quote.
I thought of you because you told me miracles happen after the third day. And so my mantra for that race became, I knew I was gonna be there for 5 days. So my mantra for that race was just see the 5th day. See the 5th day. I knew I had to put 4 nights, and I knew that they were gonna be increasingly hard. So I kept saying to myself, I just have to see the 5th day. That's it. And yeah, once the 5th day arrived, it was easier because the harder part was done.
Yeah. Mm. Well, congratulations on achieving such a wonderful achievement. I mean, wow, what a story too, of pushing through on barely any sleep. You really had to battle some stuff out there. It was really incredible.
Thank you so much. It was a great experience, and I highly recommend this 200 miler to anyone who wants to give it a try. Perfect first 100 miler. Definitely the perfect first 100 miler. No, 100, 200. 200 miler.
100, 200. It's all the same. Well, Lulu, thank you so much for sharing your story on our series. It was really great to talk with you and see you again. And I'm looking forward to seeing you in person. It won't be very long. I'm sure that we'll bump into each other on the trails again.
I'm sure I'll see you later this year at Javelina.
That's absolutely right. We'll be there.
It was nice seeing you, Wes. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Lulu. Talk to you soon.
Take care.
Thank you, Lulu, for coming on and sharing your story, and congratulations on your huge achievement. If you have recently finished your first ultra, or if you've recently completed a major new distance and would like to share your story here on this series, go to onwardendurance.com and click on Ultra Origins at the top of the page. Thanks a lot for watching. I look forward to sharing more Ultra Origin stories with you.